All the world is a very narrow bridge, and the most important thing is not to fear at all. If you won't be better tomorrow than you were today, then what do you need tomorrow for? Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. This is the Constitution of Israel. The Knesset. What the Knesset is. The Knesset is the parliament of the state. 2. The place of sitting. The place of sitting of the Knesset is in Jerusalem. 3. Composition. The Knesset shall, upon its election, consist of 120 members. 4. Electoral system. The Knesset shall be elected by general, national, direct, equal, secret, and proportional elections in accordance with the Knesset election laws. This section shall not be varied save by a majority of the members of the Knesset. 5. The right to vote. Every Israel nation of or over the age of 18 years shall have the right to vote in elections to the Knesset, unless a court has deprived him of that right by virtue of any law. The elections law shall determine the time at which a person shall be considered to be 18 years of age for the purpose of the exercise of the right to vote in elections to the Knesset. 5a. The right to present a list of candidates. A list of candidates for the Knesset shall be submitted only by a party. The means of association and registering of parties and the conditions for submitting a list of candidates shall be determined by law. The right to be elected. Every Israeli national who, on the day of the admission of candidates list containing his name, is 21 years of age or over, shall have the right to be elected to the Knesset, unless a court has deprived him of that right by virtue of law, or he has been sentenced by a final judgment to a penalty of actual imprisonment for a term exceeding 3 months, and on the day of submission of the list of candidates, 7 years have not yet passed since the day when he terminated his period of imprisonment, unless the chairman of the Central Elections Committee has determined that the offense of which he has been convicted, in accordance with the circumstances, does not bear moral turpitude. A candidate for the Knesset who has been sentenced as specified in subsection A, and whose judgment has been final after the submission of the list of candidates and before he has assumed tenure as a Knesset member, will be deemed to have withdrawn from the list of candidates that includes his name, or from his tenure in the Knesset as relevant, unless the chairman of the Central Elections Committee has determined that the offense of which he has been convicted in accordance with the circumstances does not bear moral turpitude. The determination of the chairman of the Central Elections Committee under subsections A and C is not required if the court has stated by law that the offense in accordance with the circumstances does not bear moral turpitude. For the actions of this section, actual imprisonment means the sum of all terms of actual imprisonment. The convicted person must serve in a single continuous period, even if ordered in different sentences, including suspended sentences that have been activated. The word offense means each of the offenses for which a period of actual imprisonment has been ordered. 6a. Restrictions on the candidacy of a Knesset member. Seceding from his faction. A. A Knesset member seceding from his faction and failing to tender his resignation as a Knesset member in close proximity to his secession shall not be included in the election for the next Knesset, in the list of candidates submitted by a party that was represented by a faction of the outgoing Knesset. This provision does not apply to the splitting of a faction under the conditions described by law. For the purpose of this section, the quote, cession from a faction, including voting in the Knesset plenum not in accordance with the faction's position regarding the expression of confidence or no confidence in the government, however, such voting shall not be deemed as cession if the Knesset member has not received any consideration in exchange for his vote. Consideration means directly or indirectly by a promise or future commitment, including the assurance of a place on a list of candidates for the Knesset, or the appointment of the Knesset member himself or someone else to a certain position. 7. Who shall not be a candidate? The following shall not be candidates for the Knesset: the President of the state, the 2 chief rabbis, a judge, a shofet, a judge, dayan, of a religious court, the state comptroller, the chief of the general staff of the defense of the army of Israel, rabbis and ministers of other religions while holding paid office, senior state employees and army officers of such grades or ranks in such factions as shall be determined by law, policemen and prison wardens of such ranks and positions as shall be determined by law, employees of corporations established by law of such ranks and positions as shall be determined by law, unless they have ceased to serve in the aforementioned position or office prior to the date for submitting the list of candidates for the Knesset, and if an earlier date has been set by law prior to the set date. 7a. Prevention of participation of candidates list. A candidate's list shall not participate in elections to the Knesset, and a person shall not be a candidate for election to the Knesset if the objects or actions of the list or the following actions of the person expressly or by implication include one of the following. 1. Negation of the existence of the State of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. 2. The incitement to racism. 3. Support of armed struggle by a hostile state or a terrorist organization against the State of Israel. A1. For the purposes of this section, a candidate that was at hostile state unlawfully within the 7 years preceding the date for submitting the candidates list is deemed a person whose actions express support of armed struggle against the State of Israel, as long as he has not proven otherwise. The decision of the Central Elections Committee that a candidate is prevented from participating in the elections requires the affirmation of the Supreme Court of Israel. A candidate will make a declaration for the purposes of this section. Particulars regarding the hearings at the Central Elections Committee and at the Supreme Court of Israel, as well as regarding a declaration under subsection, shall be prescribed by law. 8. Term of office of the Knesset. The term of office of the Knesset shall be 4 years from the day on which it is elected. 9. The date of elections. The elections of the Knesset shall take place on the 3rd Tuesday of the month of Shevan, in the year in which the tenure of the outgoing Knesset ends, but if the year which preceded that year was a leap year, the elections shall take place on the 1st Tuesday of that month. 9a. Extending the Knesset's term. The Knesset shall not extend its term except by law passed by a majority of 80 members of the Knesset, and only if special circumstances exist that prevent holding the elections at their proper time. The period of extension shall not exceed the time necessary due to the aforementioned circumstances. The election date shall be fixed by the aforementioned law. Without prejudice to the provisions of Section 34, the Knesset may be, by resolution passed by the majority of its members, advance the date of elections fixed under subsection A, provided that the new date is no earlier than the date fixed for Knesset election under Section 9. 10. Election day to be a day of rest. Election day shall be a day of rest, but transport services and other public services shall function normally. 11. Publication of election results. The results of the election shall be published in Reshumot within 8 days from election day. 12. Convening of the Knesset. The Knesset shall convene for its first meeting after the election. Results are published within 14 days of election day on the date fixed by law, unless an earlier date is prescribed by law due to a rest day, holiday, festival day, memorial day, or due to proximity to one of them, or due to the immediate days of certain Jewish festivals. 13. Amendments 27 and 37 are annulled. 14. The opening meeting, Amendment 23. The procedures of the opening meeting shall be prescribed by law and shall express the character of the State of Israel and its heritage. 15. Declaration of allegiance by members of the Knesset. A Knesset member shall make a declaration of allegiance. The declaration shall read as follows: I pledge myself to bear allegiance to the State of Israel and faithfully to discharge my mandate in the Knesset. Procedures for the declaration shall be prescribed by law. Failure to make a declaration. Where the chairman of the Knesset has called upon a member of the Knesset to make his declaration of allegiance, and the member has not done so, the member shall not enjoy the rights of a member of the Knesset so long as he has not made the declaration. 16a. Failure to make declaration due to dual citizenship. Has the Knesset member been the holder of an additional non-Israeli citizenship, and the laws of the country whose citizenship he holds permit his release from such citizenship, he shall not declare allegiance until after he has done everything required on his part to be released from such citizenship, and he shall not enjoy the rights of a Knesset member until he makes his declaration. 17. Immunity of Knesset members. The members of the Knesset shall have immunity. Particulars shall be prescribed by law. 18. Immunity of the Knesset buildings. The building of the Knesset shall have immunity. Particulars shall be prescribed by law. 19. Procedure and rules. The Knesset shall itself prescribe its procedure, insofar as such procedure has not been prescribed by law. The Knesset shall prescribe it by its rules. So long as a procedure has not been prescribed as aforementioned, the Knesset shall follow its accepted practice and routine. 20. Chairman and Vice Chairman. The Knesset shall elect from among its members a chairman and vice chairman. Until the chairman is elected, the most senior Knesset member, who is not the prime minister, a minister or deputy minister, shall serve as interim chairman. In this section, the word senior means the one whose term of office in the Knesset is the longest, consecutively or non-consecutively, and among those with equal seniority, the oldest. The Knesset may, in its rules, vet restrictions on the election of Knesset members to serve as chairman or vice chairman. The Knesset may, by a resolution passed by a majority of its members, suspend the chairman or vice chairman or set restrictions on their post, particulars to be set by law. The Knesset may, by a resolution passed by a majority of its members or by a larger majority, as may be prescribed by law, to remove from post the chairman or a vice chairman, particulars to be set by law. 20a. Acting Chairman and Interim Chairman of Knesset. Whenever the chairman of the Knesset leaves the territory of the state, a vice chairman shall serve as acting chairman until his return. Whenever the chairman of the Knesset notifies the House Committee, or if the House Committee decides that for reasons of health the chairman of the Knesset is temporarily unavailable to carry out his functions, or chairman announces that he is temporarily unable to perform his duties, and the House Committee acknowledges his announcement, a vice chairman shall serve as acting chairman until the chairman notifies the House Committee, or until the House Committee decides that the chairman is no longer unable to carry out his functions. When the post of chairman of the Knesset has fallen vacant because the chairman has resigned or has died, or because the House Committee has decided that for reasons of health he is permanently unable to carry out his functions, a vice chairman shall serve as interim chairman until the Knesset elects a new one. 1a. If the chairman of the Knesset is suspended from his post by decision under Section 20c, a vice chairman shall serve as acting chairman until the suspension is lifted or until the election of a new chairman as relevant. 2. If the chairman of the Knesset is removed from his post by a decision until Section 20d, a vice chairman shall serve as acting chairman until the election of a new chairman. D. The vice chairman who is to serve as acting chairman or interim chairman of the Knesset shall be elected in that behalf by the House Committee. E. During his tenure as acting chairman or interim chairman of the Knesset, the vice chairman shall serve in every capacity assigned to the chairman of the Knesset by law, shall carry out every function imposed upon the chairman of the Knesset by law, and shall exercise every power vested in the chairman of the Knesset by law. F. The provisions of this section shall not apply and shall also apply mutuus mutandis if the circumstances envisioned in subsection A, B, C, or C1 with regard to the chairman of the Knesset exist with regard to a vice chairman who is serving as acting chairman or interim chairman.
My friends, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain a little. Number one, it's free. Two, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you've ever been looking for to make a podcast in one place. Go ahead and download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Basic Law, Israel Lands. 1. Prohibition of transfer of ownership. The ownership of Israel lands, being the lands in Israel of the state, the Development Authority, or the Karen Kayemet LeIsrael, shall not be transferred either by sale or in any other manner. 2. Permission by law. Section 1 shall not apply to classes of lands and classes of transactions determined for that purpose by law. 3. Definition. In this law, lands means land, houses, buildings, and anything permanently fixed to land. Basic Law, the President of the State. 1. Status. A president shall stand at the head of the state. 2. Place of residence. The place of residence of the president of the state shall be Jerusalem. 3. Election and period of tenure. The president of the state shall be elected by the Knesset for 7 years. The president will serve for 1 term only. 4. Eligibility. Every Israel national who is resident of Israel is qualified to be a candidate for the office of President of the State. 5. Date of election. The election of the President of the State shall be held no earlier than 90 days and no later than 30 days before the expiration of the period of tenure of the President in office. If the place of the President of the State falls vacant before the expiration of his period of tenure, the election shall be held within 45 days from the day on which such place falls vacant. The chairman of the Knesset, in consultation with the vice chairman, shall fix the day of the election and shall notify it to all members of the Knesset in writing at least 3 weeks in advance. If the day of the election does not fall in one of the session terms of the Knesset, the chairman of the Knesset shall convene the Knesset for the election of the president of the state. 6. Proposal of candidates. A proposal of candidate for president of the state shall be submitted in writing to the chairman of the Knesset, together with the consent of the candidate in writing. On the 14th day before the day of the election, a member of the Knesset shall not sponsor the proposal of more than 1 candidate. A person, any 10 or more members of the Knesset propose his candidacy, shall be a candidate for president of the state, except if the number of sponsors decreased below 10 because of the deletion of the name of a member of the Knesset as described in subsection 3. 3. Where a member of the Knesset sponsored the proposal of more than 1 candidate, the name of that member of the Knesset shall be deleted from the list of sponsors for all candidates he sponsored. Where the number of sponsors of a candidate decreased below 10 because of the deletion of a name from the list of sponsors, a member of the Knesset who did not sponsor any proposal may add his name to the list of sponsors of that candidate, no later than 8 days before the election. B. The chairman of the Knesset shall notify all the members of the Knesset in writing, no later than 7 days before the day of the election, of every candidate proposed, and of the names of the members of the Knesset who have proposed him, and shall announce the candidates at the opening of the meeting at which the election is held. 7. Voting. The election of the President of the state shall be held by secret ballot at a meeting at the Knesset assigned only for that purpose. 8. Election by majority of votes. If there are 2 candidates or more, the candidate who has received the votes of a majority of the members of the Knesset is elected. If no candidate receives such a majority, a second ballot shall be held. At the second ballot, only 2 candidates stand for election. The candidate who at the second ballot receives a majority of the votes of the members of the Knesset who take part in the voting and vote for one of the candidates is elected. If 2 candidates receive the same number of votes, voting shall be repeated. If there is only one candidate, the ballot will be in favor or against him, and he is elected if the number of votes in his favor outweighs the number of votes against him. If the number of votes in his favor equals the number of votes against him, a second ballot shall be held. If no president of the state is elected under subsection B, a repeat ballot shall be held within 30 days of the day of the ballot with accordance to section 5 to 7. And this section, but the proposal of a candidate shall be submitted no later than 7 days before the day of the election. 9. Declaration of Allegiance. The President-elect shall make and sign before the Knesset the following Declaration of Allegiance. I pledge myself to bear allegiance to the State of Israel and to its laws, and faithfully to carry out my functions as President of the State. Your journey to financial fitness begins with just one step. It can seem daunting to get all your financial ducks in a row, but the beauty of any journey is that it doesn't happen all at once. Step by step, goal by goal, do that next good thing by putting financial protection in place with life insurance. Then, no matter what happens in your financial or life journey, your loved ones will be okay financially. Take that first step today. Click on the link below and schedule an appointment with me. I can help. Making of declaration and commencement of period of tenure. The President-elect shall make his declaration of allegiance upon the expiration of the period of tenure of the preceding President of the state, or as soon as possible beforehand, and shall begin to hold office upon the expiration of the period of tenure of the preceding President of the state. If the place of the preceding President of the state falls vacant before the expiration of his period of tenure, the President-elect shall make his declaration of allegiance as soon as possible after his election and shall begin to hold office upon making his declarations of allegiance. 11. Functions and power. A. The President of the state shall sign every law other than a law relating to its power. 2. Shall carry out the functions assigned to him by the basic law, the government. 3. Shall receive from the government a report on its meetings. 4. Shall accredit the diplomatic representatives of the state, shall receive the credentials of diplomatic representatives sent to Israel by foreign states, shall empower the consular representatives of the state, and shall confirm the appointments of consular representatives sent to Israel by foreign states. Shall sign such conventions with foreign states as have been ratified by the Knesset. Shall carry out every function assigned to him by law in connection with the appointment and removal from office of judges and other office holders. B. The President of the state shall have power to pardon offenders and to tighten penalties by the reduction or commutation thereof. C. The President of the state shall carry out every other function and have every other power assigned to him by law. Countersignature. The President of the state, on an official document other than a document connected with the formation of a government or the dissolution of a Knesset, shall require the countersignature of the Prime Minister or of such other minister as the government may decide. 13. Immunity. With regard to discharge of functions, the President of the state shall not be amenable to any court or tribunal, and shall be immune from any legal act, in respect of anything connected with his functions of power. The President of the state shall not, in giving evidence, have to disclose anything which came to his knowledge in the discharge of his functions as the President of the state. The immunity of the President of the state under this section shall continue after he has ceased to be President of the state. 14. Immunity from criminal proceedings. The President of the state shall not be criminally prosecuted. The period during which, by virtue of this section, the President of the state cannot be prosecuted for an offense shall not be counted in calculating the period of prescription of the offense. 15. Evidence. If the President of the state is required to give evidence, his evidence shall be taken at such place and time and as shall be determined with this section, with his sanction. Salary and other payments. The salary of the President of the state and other payments to be made to him during his period of tenure shall be fixed by resolution of the Knesset, which may empower the Finance Committee in that behalf. Resolutions under this section shall be published in Reshumot. Don't quit. When things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile but you have to sigh, when care is pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. And life is queer with its twists and turns, as every one of us sometimes learns, and many a fellow turns about when he might have won had he stuck it out. Don't give up though the pace seems slow, you may succeed with another blow. Often the goal is nearer than it seems to a faint and faltering man. Often the struggler has given up when he might have captured the victor's cup, and he learned too late when the night came down how close he was to the golden crown. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint of the clouds of doubt, and you never can tell how close you are. It may be near when it seems afar. So stick to the fight when you're hardest hit. It's when things seem worst that you mustn't quit. The Daughters of St. Paul, Boston, Massachusetts.